Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're going to be looking at the social studies standards for North Carolina. So, to do that, we're going to need to look at all the different words, the essential vocabulary for North Carolina. So, you'll need to follow along with your guided notes in your class notebook. That will have been pushed out to your class notebook Tuesday afternoon, and you will have it available to you as you go along. You may watch this video as many times as you need to understand and be comfortable with the material. You are expected to have watched this video and completed your guided notes by the time you come to class, either on Friday for my third and fourth period or on Monday for my first and second. The guided notes and your assignment, which is located in the module that you access this video from, are both due by Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. All right, let's get started. What's the essential vocabulary that you need to know? You need to know the following words: explain, analyze, summarize, construct, use, compare, and evaluate. Once again, that is explain, analyze, summarize. There's an E at the end of summarize. Construct, use, compare, and evaluate. These are the 7 words that are essential to our standards. For explain. So, to understand explain, the definition is to make an idea, situation, or problem clear to someone by describing it in more detail, revealing relevant facts or ideas. So, let's break this down a little bit. So, explaining, making something clear by describing it in more detail or revealing relevant facts or ideas. So, to explain something is to take it and make it clear. So, maybe you have an idea. There's an idea in social studies that you need to know. Explain means it needs to become more clear by either description with more detail or by revealing relevant facts and ideas. So connecting it to other things that you already know. So an example of this standard. Example of this standard is down here, 7.G.1.1, which says explain how environmental conditions and human responses to those conditions influence modern societies and regions. So at the end of a lesson where you have this standard, you'll need to be able to explain or make clear how environmental conditions and human responses to those conditions have influenced modern societies and regions. So when you see the word explain at the beginning of the standard, that means that you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to reveal more about it, to make it clear. You can't just say, it is this. You have to be able to say, it is this because it is this so. These are the things that make it so. All right? Next on our list is analyze. So to analyze is to examine methodically and in detail the constitution or structure of something, especially information, typically for purposes of explanation and interpretation. So analysis is the backbone of social studies. It's what you do in social studies. So when I ask you to analyze something, or the standard says you're analyzing something, you're looking at that thing that I've asked you to do, or the standard that I asked you to do. and you're going to look at it in detail, and you're going to look at the structure of it, the what it consists of, what it is, and you're going to do that in preparation to explain it or to interpret it. So analyzing is examining in detail the construction or the structure of information so that you can later explain or interpret it. This is the first step to doing things like writing papers, answering questions, basics of social studies. These are things you're going to have to do over and over again. So when I ask you to analyze, I'm not just asking you to parrot back to me. I'm asking you to look at it in detail and give me your detail. So an example standard is 7.H.2.4. Analyze the economic, political, and social impacts of disease in modern society. So you're going to look at, so for this standard, you're going to look at the impacts of a disease on society. Look at how it affected economics or money. Look at how it affected politics. You look at how it impacted society, the social aspect of society. So, how people interact with each other. You're going to look at those impacts. You're going to be looking at them in detail so that you can explain it and interpret it after you've done analyzing. Next is to summarize. So summarize is to give a brief statement of the main points of something. You do summarizations in ELA all the time, where you get a story or a poem, a story or a poem or a passage, and they ask you, what's the point? Or I'll give you a quote and ask you, what's the point? We're asking you to make a summary, to summarize. So I do need to emphasize this bit here, which is brief. The brief statement of something. The summarization is not a 2-page paper. Summarization is not a 5-minute ramble. Summarization is a brief statement of the points. You're just listing the points, telling me what the points are. It doesn't matter to you, or it doesn't matter to go in deeper. That's when you go in deeper for analysis. You go in deeper for explanation. You don't go deeper for summary. For summary, you just, what's the point? So, for an example standard would be 7.E.1.3. Summarize the main characteristics of various economic systems. So, for this standard, you would look at the economic system that we're talking about. So if we're talking about the feudal system, for example, as an economic system. So you would look at the feudal system and summarize what the characteristics are. You give me brief points of what are the main things that make feudalism. What are the main bits there? Next, we have construct. Construct is to build or erect something, typically a building, road, or machine. So usually you use the word construct in places like STEM. You would construct something. Or in computer lab, you would construct a program in computer lab. So those are correct. However, in social studies, the things that we construct are maps. So I give you a blank map and tell you to construct the political system of Europe. You would take the map and you would draw all the different countries. I'm not going to ask you to do that because it's a lot, but that is something there. So, since I've already moved on to it, this is the example standard 7.G.2.1. Construct maps, charts, and graphs to explain data about geographic phenomena. So, when you have data, or data, depending on how you say it, when you have data, you're going to need a way to interpret that data. So if I give you, say I give you data about climate change, your job for this standard would be to make a chart or a graph explaining or interpreting climate change. You might make a bar graph where you show different temperatures throughout the years. You might make a chart that gives the year, the temperature, and gives high temperatures and low temperatures, and the years where it was really hot, years where it was really cold. Those kind of things would be construction. The next one is use. So use is to take, hold, or deploy something as a means of accomplishing a purpose, of achieving a result. So mostly you know what use is. You say use on a regular basis. So when you use something, you are taking something as a means to accomplish a goal. It may be a purpose, it may be a result. So you're going to use something to do something. Use is an active word. You use something to do something. So an example standard is 7.G.1.3, where you're going to use primary and secondary sources to interpret various historical perspectives. So you know what primary and secondary sources are. I will cover them in a later video. But you should already know what they are. Primary sources are sources from the time that are contemporary to the topic. Secondary sources are things that interpret it or were written long after the original time. So 7.G.1.3 wants you to use those two kinds of sources, to interpret historical perspective. How is the way we've looked at this event changed from the time where we use the primary source, or the literature documents used at the time, versus the secondary sources, the literature documents that are written afterwards? How has perspective changed? How has it changed even to now from when secondary sources were written? Things like that. So specifically, it's use. You are using or taking something taking these primary and secondary sources with the intent of achieving the result of interpreting historical perspective. Compare. So you compare by estimating, measuring, or noting the similarities or dissimilarities between things. So I'm sure you've heard compare apples to oranges. That's a way of saying these two things, you're comparing things that don't go together. So, if you compare apples to oranges, you're not giving a fair comparison because one is not equal to the other. However, if I compare student to student assignments, so one of you gets an assignment, another gets an assignment. If I compare to see what was done well and what wasn't, if I take those and compare them against the assignment key, I can see the similarities to the key or the dissimilarities. standard that we use is 7.C&G.1.2. C and G is the prefix for culture and government, or civics and government, rather, where you compare the sources of power and governmental authority in various societies. So for this one, this is where you do a lot of construct as well. So comparison is you're taking multiple societies, like let's say you take English society and French society, and Italian society, and Ghanaian society. Ghana is a country in Africa. You take these three, or four, rather, take these four countries, and you're going to compare how government authority works in each country and what the sources of power for each authority are. So where do they get their power? Is it divine right? Is it popular sovereignty? These are things I'll explain when we get to them. I'll expect you to know them right now. But you're looking at how do their governments work, and you're comparing them to each other. You're seeing how are they similar, how are they not. Okay? Next is evaluate. So the definition of evaluate is to form an idea of the amount, number, or value of something, or to assess something. So when you evaluate, you're looking at something and determining, what it is, determining how it's impacted something, how it's influenced something. For social studies, evaluations are what are the impacts, what are the influences, how does this thing work with other things? So the example standard that we're getting for this is 7.G, Civics and Government, point 1.2. Evaluate how the Western concept of democracy has influenced the political ideas of modern society. So you would be looking at how the West, which is Western Europe and the United States, thinks about democracy, our ideas of how democracy works. You're going to look at that and then look at other societies, look at modern societies, and see how that concept of democracy has influenced modern society. So how has the way that the U.S. thinks of democracy impacted the way democracy is practiced in places like the Middle East, in places like Southeast Asia, South America, things like that. It's evaluate. You're assessing or forming an idea about the value of something. And that is the last of our words. So you're going to have to see the Canvas module for your assignment. I'm not going to go through the assignment because you can go there and read if you need help. Feel free to need help or you need clarification. Please bring it up in one of our meetings or come see me during my office hours. So again, the standard vocabulary for this are explain, analyze, summarize, construct, use, compare, and evaluate. If you understand these 7 words, you will understand the North Carolina standards. Understand how to do them when I ask you to. And I am going to ask you to. Thank you for listening. Please complete your assignment and have a good day.